All right, what's up, guys? Good evening and welcome to Diabetes Talk. I am your host, Charlie O'Connell. We are broadcasting live and direct from New Haven, Connecticut, here in the GLUCOSEZONE studio. We just had an amazing upper body flex workout. Guys, I would love to send to us your flex shots. I want to see those muscle parking lots building. I want to see you taking the fight to diabetes. And guys, I want to encourage you, if you haven't joined us for our live workout yet, join us. We do a live, full-length exercise workout before these talks. They're a lot of fun and they're awesome. All right. I want to acknowledge we got a whole bunch of people on the line. I want to start with Instagram and my man, Dane. Dane, I see you on Instagram. It is great to have you here, bro. It's so fun, guys, when we have friends and family from around the world checking in and joining this conversation. And Frank, I see you. And Romina Fialo. That's what's up on Instagram. Great to have you here. I love these Instagram names. Now, on YouTube, I want to recognize BassFinder68. BassFinder, let me know where you're logging in from. I'm so happy that you joined us for this talk. DeLeslin, that's okay that you missed the workout. I know that you're going to do it. And guys, I just want you all to know, DeLeslin has been kicking diabetes butt for at least the last year in the GlucoSezone on a daily basis. It's freaking awesome, and I see you. And Jeanette, I see you too. And Jeanette, you did a great job with that upper body workout. I know how hard you were working, okay? Donnie Ray joined us for the workout as well. Donnie, it is great to have you here. So, guys, we are having some technical difficulty with our Facebook broadcast right now. We're just on YouTube in the GlucoSezone app and on Instagram. So if you're joining us on Facebook or waiting, if you're looking to join us on Facebook, I will let you know when Facebook is up and running. Facebook has had a tough week, guys. All right. Okay, cool. BassFinder is joining us from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That is awesome. Okay, so guys, tonight's topic is one of the most important topics that we are going to talk about, and it is diabetes and depression. And I'm going to share with you guys some very, very practical, realistic, and real life and personal anecdotes of what diabetes and depression, the different manifestations that they can take, okay, and then most importantly, what are the positive things that you can do to pull yourself out of a depressed state or to become aware of how depression may be impacting your life, okay? And of course, I want to answer all of your questions. So, the first thing is, guys, okay, is a diagnosis of diabetes can be very depressing. Let's just get it out there. Okay? And being aware of your mental health when you're diagnosed with diabetes is one of the most important things that you can do to help yourself avoid depression, deal with depression, or pull yourself away from the brink of a depressed state. Okay? And what's crazy is you hear it all the time. People who have been living with diabetes for a long time who are now in a very positive place, like me, for example, will share with you they were depressed for a long time, okay? And depression can take many, many forms. And I suffered from depression for a long time. So it's not anything that you should be ashamed of. In fact, it's actually a natural part of dealing with diabetes. So there is something called DADA, and it's very, very important that you understand what DADA is. And what DADA is an acronym for the 4 stages of mental health and grieving related to diabetes. And what DADA stands for is denial, anger, depression, and acceptance. And everybody living with diabetes goes through those 4 mental health stages. And it's very, very important that you are aware of that, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to start off by breaking down and explaining two very, very common forms of depression, one for type 1 diabetes and the other for type 2 diabetes. Okay? And I'm going to start with type 1 diabetes. So, a very common form of depression related to type 1 diabetes has to do with not being able to handle being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and having a feeling of, what did I do to deserve this? Okay? And because we can't understand what we did to deserve this, it is very easy for resentment, confusion, okay, and ultimately a crisis in confidence to set in. And it happens all the time. It happened to me very personally. So when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I immediately did two things. The first thing was I was scared, I was angry, and I was resentful. And what was crazy was I didn't even know what I was scared of because I didn't even know what diabetes was. I didn't know what I was angry about, and I didn't even know who I was resentful towards, but I was having those feelings. And in my case, I knew, okay, that if I buried those feelings, nobody would know that I was having them. And for me personally, I was afraid of people thinking that I was afraid. That's how crazy, that's how diabetes can mess with your mind so much. I was afraid that people were going to think I was afraid. Okay? I was afraid that people were going to think that I was angry, that I was resentful. Okay? And my kind of self-defense for that whole thing was to bury those feelings. And so literally, when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and in the critical care unit at the hospital, that first night that I was in the hospital by myself, I told myself I was not going to let this affect any of my dreams. I was not going to let this affect anything that I wanted to do. And I wasn't going to let anybody know that I was having these feelings. And so when my family came to the hospital the next day and said, "Charlie, are you okay?" I said, "Yes, I'm fine." And everybody was like, "Wow, you're fine?" They were like, "Really?" And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm not going to let this stop me from doing anything. I'm good. But the reality was I was not good. There was no way, shape, or form that I was fine. And the reality was, you know what happens when you bury feelings like anger, resentment, hostility, fear? You know what happens when you bury those things? They take deep, deep root into your being. And they become a subconscious part of you. And in my case, I buried those feelings so deep that I wasn't even able to recognize their presence. And I then went through years of depressed behavior because these fundamentally bad things, bad feelings, negative emotions, I had buried so far down into my consciousness that they became a part of me. And guys, there's only one way to alleviate that situation. You have to rip those feelings out. Okay? And that can be a very, very painful experience. And the thought of ripping those harmful emotions out can be so scary that many people make the choice to remain depressed. In other words, they make the choice, whether it's conscious or subconscious, to stay in a bad place because they don't want to go through the pain of getting to a good place. And what this talk about, guys, tonight is acknowledging that and then encouraging you that whatever you are projecting in terms of the pain that it's going to require to get from a bad place to a good place, it's not as bad as you think, number one, and you will not believe how much better you feel as soon as you let go of those feelings. Because that's really what ends up happening is we feel deserving of being resentful. We feel deserving of being angry. That's what happens when you have a grudge or a resentment or you're angry about something that happened to your life. There's a tendency to pet that grudge. We nurse it and we think about it over and over and over, okay? And it becomes something that we become comfortable with, even though it is a totally, totally negative thing. So you got to rip those feelings out. You got to go down to the root. You got to go down to the root of the source of the negative emotion, and it's got to be pulled out. And I want to encourage you that you can do it, okay? And it's a life-changing thing. So the resentment, okay, resentment that comes, yes, the why me scenario, exactly. June, thank you for June. It is great to see you, by the way, on here. And Shayla, it is great to see you too. We got a ton of people joining us on Instagram. Shayla and June, it is great to see you guys. So that whole why me scenario, okay, and the resentment and the anger that comes with that, okay? And that is a very, very common form of depression in type 1 diabetes. Now, the way that I personally, let me just finish before I go to type 2. The way that I personally was able to come out of that was by having some life experiences that enabled me to do two things. The first thing was to gain humility in my life. And humility came in the form of me recognizing that my problems paled in comparison to 99.99% of the world. And that the reality was there were millions of people, check that, there were billions of people who would kill to have my problems. And that was a huge dose of humility that I had to accept, okay? The second part of that was then starting to think about helping other people. As soon as I started helping other people, I started feeling better about myself. And when you turn your focus to others, you start knocking down the pillars of self-obsession. And the pillars of self-obsession are fear, anger, resentment, and hostility. Okay? Those are the 4 pillars of self-obsession. And as soon as you start turning your attention to others, as soon as you start turning your attention to helping other people, all of a sudden, that self-obsession starts to go away. All right? Now, so type 1 diabetes and depression, basically in June, you said it well, has to do with the why me syndrome. Okay? Now let's turn to type 2 diabetes. And let's talk about a very, very common source of depression related to type 2 diabetes. And very interestingly, the source and manifestation of the depression is actually the exact opposite conclusion. So for type 1, people get this huge resentment about why me. But for type 2, in many times, It's the exact opposite. People living with type 2 diabetes start spiraling down a hole of responsibility for their situation. So they start negative talking themselves. They start, I knew that I had this problem. I knew that I shouldn't have been eating this food. I knew that I needed to be exercising more. I knew that my diabetes was starting to get out of control. I knew that these foods were not good for me. I knew that this job was negatively impacting my health. I deserve whatever the bad consequences are for my behavior. And I want to stop you right there, because guess what? Nobody deserves to have diabetes. Period. I'm not going to let you do that to yourself. I'm not going to let you spiral down that hole, okay? Spiral down that negative pity pot of, I knew what I was doing, I got myself into this situation, and now I deserve the negative consequences. Nobody deserves the negative consequences of diabetes. That's because nobody deserves to have diabetes. Okay? So what's so interesting is we see this all the time. People living with type 2 diabetes, they are hesitant to actually make a change because for some weird, depressed reason, they feel like they deserve the negative consequences of their past behavior. All right? And I'm here to tell you right now, that is not true. And if you are doing that to yourself, you need to snap out of it. Nobody deserves bad things related to when it comes to diabetes. Nobody deserves diabetes, okay? And you want to know why I know that? Here's the reason why. 1 out of 3 Americans either have diabetes or at a high risk for diabetes. 1 out of 3. That's 33% of the population. Guys, it is statistically impossible for 33% of the population of 300 million people to be doing something so different from the other part of the population that they somehow deserve to have a disease. Okay? It's just statistically impossible. Your behavior is no different. So I need you to recognize that. Okay? I need you to recognize that your genetic susceptibility to type 2 diabetes, not your fault. In most likely, the biggest case, most cases, your behavior is not really any different than basically the entire population. Okay? So don't allow yourself to go down that hole of, I deserve, okay? I deserve to have diabetes. It's actually the exact opposite. You deserve to take back control of your life. You deserve to get rid of diabetes. You deserve to benefit from the fruits of labor. Okay? And by labor, I mean hard work, and I mean making the right decisions. And guys, that's what control, when we talk about controlling diabetes, we are talking about controlling the things that you are in control of. Right? Controlling what you think. Positive thinking goes a long way. Controlling your dedication to the gym, controlling your dedication to working out in GLUCOSEZONE, controlling sticking to your meal plan. You are in control of that. Doesn't matter what you did in the past. It doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't matter what you did in the past. The past is the past. You can't do anything about it. So wallowing in self-pity about the choices you made 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it is so crazy how people make one mistake, right, 20 years ago, and they beat themselves up for the next 20 years, and they don't make any change. All right? And I want to throw out a linguistic variation that may help you understand that. The difference between English, right, and Romance languages in a phrase like I am lazy versus I have been lazy. Just let that sink in for a second, right? The difference between characterizing yourself versus characterizing your behavior. Okay? I am a bad eater versus I have been a bad eater. I am not the type of person that likes to go to the gym versus I have not liked going to the gym. This little tiny change in how you characterize yourself and your behavior can make all the difference in the world. Okay? So, those are the two very, very basic, common forms of depression that are associated with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Okay? What I want to encourage you guys to do is once you are ready to be honest with yourself and acknowledge that mental health is associated with diabetes, I want to encourage you then to get a therapist, okay? Because, guys, this is a common thing that happens, okay? So, making an appointment with a therapist is not a sign of weakness. It's actually the exact opposite. It is a sign of self-awareness and strength. That you have the strength, that you have the confidence, that you are ready to let go of the thinking of the past. You are ready to be honest with yourself, your decisions, your part in your circumstances, and then basically willing to open yourself up to positive solutions to change your situation. Okay? And that's really what diabetes and depression is all about. Now, the other part, okay, is physical activity depression. So many people with diabetes are physically depressed. And what the definition of physically depressed is, you are not moving. Okay? And the longer you don't move, the harder it is to start moving. And generally speaking, guys, it's that first step that is literally the hardest one to take. Every step you take after the first step, it becomes easier and easier and easier. But that first step can be so hard. Okay? And it happens to so many people. Now, why does physical depression happen? Well, maybe you had a negative experience with exercise in the past. You would not believe how many people I have met who, because they hated gym class when they were 13 years old, and they had to wear sweatpants that were too tight, or they had a jerk of a gym class teacher, now they've decided they don't like exercise. And now 25 years later, that one experience as a teenager has scarred them. Okay? Got to snap out of that. Let's talk about another form of physical depression. Physical depression as relates to diabetes can happen when you have a negative experience with exercise related specifically to your diabetes. You have a low blood sugar episode. You have a high blood sugar episode. Guys, I want to encourage you. An article came out today in the Hartford Courant, which is a newspaper up here in New England, about GLUCOSEZONE. Okay? And there's a lot in there about my actual personal story and how negative experiences with my diabetes and exercise really negatively affected me. In fact, a lot of the reason why I've started this whole program is because I understand how challenging this can be. But the challenge is not worthy of depression. Just because it's challenging doesn't mean that it's not worth it. And in fact, guys, we all know this. Nothing in life that's worth doing is going to be easy. So these are all things, guys, that are involved with diabetes and depression. Okay? Now, the last thing that I want to talk about tonight is if you have been clinically diagnosed with depression, if you have been clinically diagnosed with bipolar disorder, if you have been clinically diagnosed with a condition associated with depression, I want to encourage you to do two things. The first thing is, that's okay. Clinical diagnosis of things is a healthy thing. Okay? It's when people go for years with a condition that has not been clinically diagnosed because they're either ignoring it, they're embarrassed about it, or basically they don't want to admit it to themselves. That's when people really, really get in trouble. So a clinical diagnosis of anything, guys, is nothing to be ashamed about. What I want you to do, though, is acknowledge and recognize that, one, there may be certain things related to your clinical diagnosis that have to be accounted for when it comes to your diabetes. There are definitely some medications that have impact on glucose levels. That is a known fact. So we need to acknowledge that. We need to recognize that that is the truth. Because that is the only way, that's the first and only way to actually then come up with a positive solution. Okay? I also want to encourage you to explore physical activity that can help your clinically diagnosed condition. All right? And things, I'm just going to throw out a couple of things. Obviously, I want you to join us in GLUCOSEZONE. Aerobic activity, guys, you have all heard of a runner's high. Okay? The runner's high, what the runner's high is when you exercise aerobically for 30 or more minutes, that literally releases endorphins in your body that make you feel happy. Okay? So literally exercise can make you feel happy. You want to know why? Because we are human beings designed to move. We are not designed to sit for 10 hours a day playing on the computer all stressed out because you don't know how to use Excel spreadsheet. Okay? So acknowledge that. Get exercise. Along that line, there are different types of exercise that can be incredibly powerful for dealing with things like depression. And so those are things like yoga. I'm going to give you two extreme examples. Yoga and kickboxing. Okay? Yoga is designed to help you turn inward. Okay? Start a breathing pattern and basically come at peace, find peace inside yourself. Okay? Kickboxing is designed to be an outward expression of fear, anxiety, anger, take it out. You could take it out in the kickboxing class. It's an amazing, amazing thing. All right? Okay. Let me just stop right there. I know on YouTube in particular, there has been an incredible conversation going on, and people have been sharing so much, okay, with basically the reality of dealing with diabetes and the reality of dealing with depression. And what I want to acknowledge is there are people in this community who, by acknowledging their position and then being willing to put the hard work in, are able to achieve amazing results. And, you know, DeLeslin just shared something. DeLeslin just shared, starting a year ago, she made the commitment and made the decision to put the work in, to make the changes to her diet that she knew she needed to make. And now, right, her diabetes is in a much, much, much different place. She has taken back control of her life, okay? All right? And back control of her diabetes. It really, really is an amazing thing, okay? Now, this is such an important topic, guys, and I just want to encourage everybody, especially on YouTube and especially on Instagram, who has joined us tonight. By sharing your personal experience, you may never know who you positively impacted to become willing and able to make a change. Who you positively impacted to help realize I'm not terminally unique, okay? Who you positively impacted to help realize I can do this, all right? And that is the power of sharing. And it's an honor to be part of this group, right? I want to encourage everybody who's listening, okay? Be able to take the bad with the good. And just because you have a bad day, don't let that bad day spiral into a bad week. Don't let that bad week spiral into a bad 3 months, okay? Wake up every day with a renewed willingness to accept reality and then control the things that you can control. And I guarantee you, if you do that honestly, you will start to feel better about yourself, you will start to feel better about your diabetes, and you will start the journey in the process of going from a bad, negative, depressed place to a happy, positive, joyous place. And it may be painful, but don't let the fear of the pain stop you from gaining the joy, the benefit, and ultimately the life that you want to live and lead, okay, by making those hard steps. And on that note, guys, we're going to call it a night. Thank you so much for joining me for this talk. This is such an important topic, and I can't wait to hear from you guys and hear how you're taking the fight to diabetes and basically inspiring others around the world to do the same thing. Great job, guys.